25, I moved to New York. I wrote a letter to David Koussevitzky that I had heard him when I was 10, and I said, I want to study with you. I moved to New York. I lived on 57th and 9th. I shared with another Yiddish performer. Studying with David Koussevitzky was the greatest pleasure that I could have had as an artist, as a chazan, as a singer, everything. He was a genius of a cantor with an easy high D. His tenor range was like, he had almost the head voice that Moshe did. They were both spectacular. And I'll never forget, once he was teaching me a piece. I even remember what the piece was, by Brunn. And he always liked the way I learned as a kid, the Nusach from Brownstone. So after he finished this phenomenal piece that I learned, by rote, I wasn't then and I'm not now a good sight reader. And so what happened was, I said to him, how would you do it if you were improvising? Well, depends. If I see it's an Elam that wants to hear a chazan, but if I see that they're interested in running to the Kiddush, I make it fast. But otherwise, and then he improvised, it was better than the piece. And my mouth opened wide. And I was just thinking in my head, I suppose naively, I was thinking that if I studied with Koussevitzky, I would be able to do what he does. And very few people in the world were born with that voice. And he knew I felt bad because of how I looked. I looked forlorn, like, I can never do that. And he said, you know something? I know what you're thinking. I said, what am I thinking? He said, you're thinking you would like to sing like me. And I said, that's exactly what I'm thinking. He said, Moshe was considered the greatest chazan of Europe. But before him was Gershon Sirota. He had a bigger voice than all the Koussevitzky brothers put together. And Moshe, when he got the job in Vilna, he went to study with Wolf, the great voice teacher, in Warsaw, and he heard Sirota sing at Shabbos. He came home and he said to us in Yiddish, Yinglach, brothers, boys, he says, everybody thinks I'm such a great voice. He said, I heard Sirota, all four of us, he could put us in his left back pocket. And David said, I wanted to sing like Moshe. He said, Herschel, I can't sing a Yiddish theater number like you. So you just be the best Herschel you could be. And I have many faults, but I never was jealous of cantorial talent. And I heard people who could sing circles around me. And the 30 years I was here in Los Angeles, I brought the best cantors in the world, who all had better voices than me. And I have other faults, but I wanted the people here to hear the best cantors in the world. As you can tell from the little story I just told you what he was like, he was a very kind man who wouldn't say a bad thing about anybody, especially cantors. Between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, I was a Yiddish actor and a cantor from 70 to 80, my years in New York and Greenwich, Connecticut. So I used to do Kevaovis, the Sunday between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. I would do El Rachamim for whoever from the Yiddish actors had passed away, and so on and so on. And what happened? One time I was doing it when I was studying with David Koussevitzky, probably about 1972, and they told me that the great Mordechai Yardeni, who had been a wonderful cantor, more of a folk singer than a cantor and a writer of cantorial, that he was going to do some of the Emol Rachamims. I said, wonderful. So I did a few, he did a few. Well, to say that his voice was terrible would be a great compliment. It was horrendous. There was nothing in there. The poor man was just croaking away. And what I was happy about is I knew Tuesday when I go to David Koussevitzky's lesson, I'm going to ask him what he thinks of Yardeni's voice. And he's going to tell me it was lousy, right? Wrong. So I come Tuesday after Yardeni was croaking there Sunday, and I start my lesson. I say, oh, by the way, I said El Malach a few times and we had Yardeni. What do you think of Yardeni's voice? Well, when I hear Yardeni sing, I must say, der Yid, this Jew, has a beautiful yarmulke, on his head, because his voice. David Koussevitzky was the cantor when Judy and I got married, because, you know, we weren't very rich at that time. I didn't want to have the wedding in Greenwich where I was the cantor. I was about, in Greenwich, I would say I was the poorest man by about $80 million in Greenwich, Connecticut. So I had it in Great Neck where I was the cantor, 78, 79, 80. We got married there, and Koussevitzky was the cantor. Unfortunately, he lost his daughter just a few months before our wedding, October 19th. And what happened was his voice, he couldn't do that Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. We were October 19th. His voice wasn't back completely, but he wanted to be the cantor at our wedding, thank God. And it didn't work real well, his voice, until the very end. He had, at many Orthodox weddings, they used to have a little boy called Avimale Yingele, a little boy who sang Vimale. Vimale says, Vimale all the wishes of your heart should come true. And suddenly, you know, he had been working on, he just couldn't get the voice to go. All of a sudden, they go, the voice was there. And I look at his eyes and I know what he's thinking. He says, my voice comes back. Jan Pierce is in the audience. All these cantors are in the audience. I got to give him something. So he went, and he just went to town improvising. And my wife started to cry. And my brother under the canopy started to cry. And he gave up a male that I will never forget. Unfortunately, I didn't tape the wedding. So it's in my mind and in my heart.